We're live.
Yes.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Monday, September 16th GOC meeting. And to thank Shanice here for sending out the meeting minutes from last August 19th meeting. I didn't see any correction, but if you do, if anyone noticed any, can we get an amendment or an emotion to approve the August 19th, 2024 meeting?
Make a motion to approve the August 19th, 2024 meeting.
I will second it.
All in favor, say aye. Okay, the August 19th meeting minutes are approved. So we have just two items to discuss. And we're gonna do a follow-up on our land bank. I have a couple of questions, and we're going to review the boards, authorities, and commission. Okay, kick it off to Mr. Nicky Joe, Andrew Saunders. He is on vacation.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Davenport, appreciate that. As a follow-up to last meeting, we stand ready to answer any questions about the land bank authority concepts. Between last meeting and this meeting, I did reach out to some folks at Rome Floyd who have a land bank authority, and I sent y'all some of that information over the weekend. So we can talk a little bit about that if you'd like. Also, Mr. Smothers was here from HCD to help answer any questions. It just really depends on where you guys want to start with this, and I'm happy to answer questions or direct folks to answer questions as well.
So I'm gonna need a little bit of education.
Yes, sir.
It may sound redundant. Tell me a little bit about what is the land bank and what was it supposed to do?
Well, and I will also defer to the attorney's office a little bit here since they've done a lot of research as it relates to a land bank. But the question is, what is the land bank supposed to do? Well, a land bank is a way for folks in the state of Georgia to acquire and dispose of government-owned property. In addition to that, it's not uncommon for land banks to have an affordable housing type function as well. In our presentation to the commission at the work session, we talked about a number of ways that we could set up a land bank here in Athens-Clarke County. Taking into account affordable housing would be one of those things, one of the components of what they did. So if you look at the work plan for Rome Floyd, it's really good because it touches on all the things that they do and some of the things that we could possibly do ourselves. But to answer your question, acquisition, disposition of land, government-owned property, and then if you like, a function of affordable housing as well.
And thank you. So as you all know, some time ago, I asked that I want to know how much land that we own as a government. And I think I asked, is in that land billable for a housing? And I don't know whether we got that information.
Okay.
We might have, and I might have missed it. I don't want to assume anything.
No, sir, I don't think you did. I certainly didn't have that in my email.
Okay, but I think it's important that if we're gonna, go down this route, that we need to understand how much land that we got as a government that we own and what's billable for us to do affordable housing. So I wanna put that on our radar as we move forward. Again, I have not had a chance to read Rome. That information, hopefully I'll get a chance to read it while I'm recuperating. But, I think for us, I'm still under the pressure, and I was thinking about this when I was riding in today. I truly believe we got enough housing. The problem we got is a rent problem. I don't think it's a housing problem. I think I truly believe there's enough supply. People, and I think we got a rent problem. I know y'all talked about that last night. I think y'all to the floor. And I wasn't here. I know we can't control the rent. But again, I think it's important to find out how much, if we can, how much supply we do have, either renting, multi-family, or just single family home that we have maybe for rent. And then again, how much property that we own as a government we can possibly build affordable housing.
We do have an inventory of ACC Gov owned property, which I'm trying to look for it right now. But I think what would be best, in my mind, because I'm a visual learner, is to provide y'all with a link, a GIS link, and let you be able to see it on a map and be able to see all of our county-owned property. Now, I will tell you, we've gone through this exercise a number of times since I've been here, and there are a handful of properties that are adequate to build any sort of housing. They range from, a duplex or a quad to, maybe a small apartment complex, maybe.
Okay.
All right, thank you, though, that's a good starting point. So we'll get that information via email. Questions I have. Sure, I don't know. Okay, so I just for clarification. So currently, Central Services, I believe, disposes of, county-owned buildings and property, correct?
Yes, sir.
So, and there was an LBA in so when we create the LBA, well, it's essentially created now, right? As we enhance it, the LBA will they will take that responsibility from Central Services. Is that correct?
They don't have to.
They don't have to.
No.
Okay.
But, so that's a decision point that we can bring to the commission. So it's not uncommon for a local government to have a real estate function. We don't have a real estate function. Our real estate function essentially sits in central services. However, we also have a right-of-way acquisition function that's in TPW, and that's just kind of where our real estate functions have been. But when we're talking about big pieces of property, we typically use central services. The Land Bank Authority could control all the property within the government or selected property that would be more conducive for affordable housing, for example.
So my train of thought is like duplicity. You have maybe the gray area of whose responsibility may be, but for clarity and simplification, to have one department to handle all real estate functions for the government. But that's just my train of thought, and if anyone has any questions.
Well, I agree in theory for it to be all one central location, but Ms. Lloyd told us the last time that we met that it's gonna take a specialized staff.
Yeah,
So we would have to build a staff that, is gonna have to be new or trained to something that Central Service and TPW already does.
yeah.
on
So
a
that's, yeah.
daily basis. So I think that since the LBA will be a new function of the government, to have it, like what you said, Nikki, and even if it's not as much as affordable housing, which is my heart, soul, bread and butter. I want affordable housing. Even if it's just not just with that component, for the LBA to be built, kind of on that foundation.
Correct.
But, to still leave central services, that function with the larger piece of property and TPW with the easement, because they are already doing that.
To Commissioner Taylor's point though, so do we have an authority in place? Do we have people in place that's on Land Bank Authority?
It's vacant, it's dormant since they.
So I guess maybe follow what you were thinking about, if we put an authority together, citizens, could that be their function? And maybe people that we put on those, have those type of experts, things that you were speaking about, Commissioner Taylor, in order for it to function. So again, and the attorneys are here and don't know whether or not that authority have those type of, powers, if I can use that word, to help us in these endeavors.
So could like LBA be comprised of Central Service and TPW staff? No. And
I want to defer to you all, but I think we need to remember when you're creating an authority or when you have an authority, it's a separate entity.
Right.
So you sort of like the Athens Downtown Development Authority. You
Yes.
wouldn't have staff running the Athens Downtown Development Authority,
okay.
the Classic Center.
The other thing, to follow up on Commissioner Fisher's, so the current LBA that we have that's dormant, it, it, it was created by a resolution. I know we had a comment about changing resolutions to ordinances. Could we just go ahead and dissolve this resolution and just create from scratch or, start from the ground up, or just modify this. So what I'm trying to get at, so, legally, we have to have ordinances, correct, instead of resolutions when it comes to these authorities.
So I want to be clear. So Austin and Courtney have the ones who've been working more specifically on some of the housing, I think, related questions with the Land Bank Authority. What I would say is I'm personally not familiar. I'm here for the BAC discussion.
Okay,
But what I would say is that first, we would need to look into it. But secondly, I mean, I think the answer is if it was just created by resolution, unless there's something very specific, there's probably a good chance it could be dissolved. But I would need to know more about how it was created before I could say that. Do either of you have any?
Yeah.
I was gonna say that under state law, it can be through ordinance or resolution.
Ah,
And so, you
Okay.
can certainly have an existing resolution that establishes a land bank authority, but to Sherry's point, if it was the will of the mayor and commission, I think that could be disbanded through resolution and started over the process if you wanted to.
I'm just saying,
we could research that, and let you know, the next meeting, just to be certain. I think authorities often take a life on their own once they're created. So I just would want to be careful that we gave you good advice on that.
okay,
Commissioner Lee, were you around when they created this? Were you on the commission then?
The land, when they created,
The
the
land-
Land Bank Authority has been out there for decades,
Okay.
probably. And it was, Mayor Denson kind of like reactivated it. I think mostly to deal with unloading some property. I think we unloaded some property or we acquired some. I think we might have acquired some. And there, it was mostly, from what I recall, it was like little spits of like right of way and stuff. Or former right of way. Yeah, and then, at some point, we passed a resolution that, any land sold through the Land Bank Authority, if there was some kind of transactional resolution where the funding from land sold to the Land Bank Authority would go into affordable housing fund. So yeah, but there wasn't a whole lot of activity. It was mostly there just to kind of like rubber stamp any transactions of, new land that was acquired. Like I recall from, the Firefly Trail, there was land acquired to make the trail, but there was additional land associated with it.
There's also a set of bylaws associated with the Land Bank Authority
Yeah.
today, not to say those bylaws couldn't change, but maybe a starting point would be, and I'm sure y'all probably have already talked about this, and I'm sorry, Andrew was here last time. What problem are we trying to solve with the Land Bank Authority? Right? What is the mission statement? What is the vision for the Land Bank Authority? Before we even think about crafting guideposts, let's just think about what we want to do. If it is for affordable housing, well, then that's certainly a component that we want to consider, and certainly want to consider putting land that is suitable for affordable housing there. Or given this authority, with the strike fund that's out there already, the authority to go out and buy property or provide money to buy property for affordable housing purposes. But other than that, what is it that we want to accomplish with that?
from our work session and from talks with other commissioners, is essentially to acquire property, existing or new, for affordable housing.
Yes,
Yeah,
I agree with Commissioner Danforth. I think that, to your point, Vicky, you're right. Purchase property, affordable housing, and what we already got in the books that we already own, and to Commissioner Taylor's point, which is, should be all our passion. So, have a forethought for our residents. I think that should be the goal and the mission. To make sure that people that work and live in this community can afford to stay here. So,
The attorney's office, HCD manager's office, all met with the folks in Savannah and actually the person from Savannah making the same. So when we talked about the Macon bid model, we talked about the Savannah model for the Land Bank Authority. And Commissioner Taylor brought up the fact that, hey, we're probably going to have staff for it. And that's factual.
yeah,
So, in all of this, whatever we want the Land Bank Authority to do, we have to be cognizant of, it's gonna cost us money to go do it. We could probably do and offset some of it with our staff, But it, you know, if we really want to get into it like everybody else is, we do have to consider, you know, the fact that we're gonna hire folks. And then by considering that, you know, one person, generally speaking, is probably not gonna bring every piece of knowledge to the table. They're gonna be really specialized in one thing. So getting this thing started, you know, probably the more focused we are, the better we'll be.
And that's why I think that because this is a new authority, the fact that central services is already knowledgeable with the big pieces and, TPW with the easements, this group that's brought in is going to be, focused on just what GLC is working on. You know, leaving central, big pieces with central services and not combining because it will be a new staff. And I know it could work either way, but if they're already doing it, this will give us more focus on, acquiring land, getting knowledgeable people around the table to be able, and it'll, you know, I feel like, those will just be two pieces that we won't have to worry about because they're in capable hands.
Sure.
If I'm saying it right.
So my train, so, well, I'm trying to, so I'm one of those persons, I hate going to government, but that's me. So what I'm trying to get at is central services and TPW already have staff. And ACD already have kind of their toe dipped into it. Why create the LBA? Can't they all just,
The LBA, to answer your question, I know exactly where you're going, has more authority, has more flexible authority.
Yeah.
Mm.
but can, okay. Y'all see where I'm going at, without creating new
Procurement and all those things are different. Well, they don't have to be. In Savannah, they use the procurement. City of Savannah, for the most part, but sometimes they do what they want, not what they want, but their own procurement. So procurement is where they have flexibility. You know, if you want to buy property, it's a little, instead of going to, you know, to executive session with mayor, they just go buy property. And then in affordable housing, they were able to do a little more than a local government's able to do.
Yeah. I see it, just look at that, just go ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead, Commissioner.
I mean, I'm interested in creating an entity that is able to partner with private entities, especially for charitable purposes. You see a lot of that in Atlanta. Atlanta has made some progress in building affordable housing. They have lots of land, but they also have access to a lot of private funds. Here, it seems like any private entity that wants to make a, you know, put its name on something here goes straight to the university and puts its name on a building. So we're not getting that private buy-in that other cities seem to get. Where, you know, I see it in Chattanooga as well. You see lots and lots of private entities partnering with the local government and building, you know, public amenities. So I would like to see us somehow reach out to those private entities and get them involved in you know, solving this problem that we face. You know, because it benefits some of them as well, the corporate entities, like they need affordable housing for their workers. UGA certainly needs affordable housing for its workers. Like most of us can't afford to live in this county anymore unless we bought our houses 20, 30 years ago.
so could, LBA be set up like a 501 where people can give donations?
Authorities take donations.
Authorities can take donations for property,
Okay.
and land bank authorities can, that's correct.
I mean,
They're not a 501(c)(3).
that's where the money is, you know, like, I mean, we need millions and millions of dollars a year. And there are corporations that certainly give millions and millions of dollars a year to all kinds of causes, and they partner with across the nation, including right down the road in Atlanta.
Okay, so it looks like.
She's right, and that's all they're doing, and maybe one thing we haven't done as a government, we had those conversations with those entities, because you're right, they get millions and millions of dollars come from private entities in Atlanta to fund a lot of stuff they're doing, so I think we need to start having those conversations with some of those folks to help our community. One of the ideas that I talked about privately, and I say it now, we got a new biotech company coming in. One thing we probably should talk to them about, do y'all want to partner with us about trying to find housing for the people y'all are hiring?
Yeah,
I mean, those type of conversations we need to look at when the industries look at coming into our community. We should have those conversations.
is that too late?
But you right, we need to know, maybe it's a conversation we need to have.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too late. It doesn't necessarily have to happen on the front end. They do charitable giving. And, if we create this entity that has that opportunity, then we can confront those industries that, are profiting from being in our community. They located here for a reason. Their executive wants quality of life and all that we have to offer here. And they do give charitable donations all over the.
So it seems like the consistency of the group is to create an LBA, and have it staffed with, maybe a grant writer and someone who does real estate, correct? That's what,
But now, one thing we could do, I'm looking at, again, I'm briefly looking at this, it seems like what they're doing in, Savannah is they got a local attorney and a local real estate agent, and we contract with, while our real estate do RFQ or whatever, P you have to do. Now, we got attorneys, so we may not need to get our attorney, but at least we can maybe get a real estate person that way, instead of trying to hire staff.
Yes, and maybe it could be accomplished in another way as well, that you have a committee.
Right.
Or the board makeup is with an attorney, a real estate person. But I will say, you're gonna need an administrator.
Oh, yeah.
So, someone who understands how to do the day to day, exactly. Because the strike fund is, we have $1 million in the strike fund out there right now. Someone's got to administer that. Someone's got to understand, how to.
So I feel like we need like a fundraising expert somewhere on staff. UGA, every college has a fundraising expert. They raise, almost the equivalent of our city budget annually, just at that university. They raise what's close to our city budget they have people on staff who bring in that money from all over. Granted, they have a pool of alumni, but, if we even had a part-time staff person who did that kind of work, we have grant writers, but grant writing and actual foundational headhunting, I guess, is what it are different.
okay. Well, we're leaning towards the board, correct? Go ahead.
There are a few thoughts. So we've done, and I think, Sarah, shared some information together. So this is the working document that Andrew kind of started. We voted in with some more information. A couple of things to consider is to communicate that the idea of a land bank means, or one of the reasons why they exist is because they have considerable more abilities and powers than your local government making these types of transactions. So generally, a number of the kind of meetings and things that I've heard about is that localities are looking at land bank authorities when they are trying to be more assertive or aggressive with how they're using their land, right? In a way that you probably wouldn't be able to do as easily with as much flexibility through your local government specifically. And then another thing to see is you'll kind of see in some of the aspects of how these boards and entities are comprised. I can share this with you. As we started getting more of this information, we started seeing how many of the people who are leading in these land banks, I think we've got information on around like 6 or 7, are many of the same players on the Georgia Land Banking, the Georgia Land Banking Association. And what we kind of see is that there is very much a state level conversation happening around these things that I think probably do get to the heart of what you're saying in terms of like these conversations in terms of like networking and things of that nature, that, are not happening here. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
It might be helpful to get somebody who has some expertise in this in one of these meetings, it's like.
Yeah, it's not me.
No, I mean, like somebody who has,
Well, he's, it-
nonprofit expertise. I mean, I'm thinking, land trusts,
Mhm.
people who dealt with this kind of affordable housing and financing and all, and private public partnership stuff.
Maybe
Yeah,
get
it's
one of
way
the
above
executive
my
directors
pay grade.
who are running a land bank authority in
Yeah.
Macon, Bibb, Savannah,
Yeah.
Rome, someone who's actually doing it right now.
And I think
Yeah,
Andrew was kind of angling for that conversation to happen as well.
Yeah, Macon Bibb, one of the conferences, one of the housing conferences that we went to, one of the commissioners was saying how they turned one of their buildings into affordable housing, and I'm not sure what type of building it, I think it was one of
Old
the.
school, right?
They've been old school, and now it's one of their, and I think it pulls up on their land bank, website, when you click on it, that's the building that he showed us through their land bank that they were able to do. So I think Macon Bibb, they have great.
And so when we hire, when we get an administrator, they'll be able to work with like CCSD as well, because they have a lot of properties and buildings that could be converted
If CCSD
as well.
is willing to do
Yeah.
that, right? That's why I think up front, if we want to continue down this path, it's really going to be important for us to set the vision for what this land bank authority,
Okay.
the very specific roles and responsibilities. So, once we get somebody, even when we're recruiting, if we can articulate exactly what we want this person to do, the higher the likelihood we get someone who comes in, hits the ground running, right? If we are like wavering, someone's going to be like, oh, what do you want me to do?
I mean, I think it's important to target, figure out who is the population that needs this affordable housing. And in other communities, I know that cities or public-private and partnerships have developed affordable housing specifically for teachers, specifically for artists and the creative community, public servants like police officers, firefighters. These are people you want living in your community. It's vital that they reside in the community. And I think that reaching out to entities that benefit from those populations can help.
My train of thought, I think the average one bedroom apartment in Athens is 1,700. I can't afford that. That's, so like, I could be wrong, but I think, yeah, I could be wrong, but I know one of my friends, she was looking for an apartment and it was like, 1,350.
yeah.
That's low.
Yeah.
And, people that I want to, like, these are hardworking, good people, they work mostly service jobs. They're not like bad people or anything. It's just, when you got kids and you have, internet and telephone and car insurance and, $1,300 a month on a service job, in the service industry job, that's a lot of money. So,
Well, and to Dexter's point about the rent problem, what appears to be happening is, folks sign a lease and there are clauses in the lease that, allow automatic rent increases, 10% a year or something, or 15%. And, so they're sitting there as their rent's going up every year, but in the meantime, new apartments in the same complexes are being advertised for cheaper, but they end up with cost. So it's almost, it's more profitable for some of these entities to keep properties vacant while they're already occupied properties the rent keeps going up. And you see it with storage units too. I just realized it's going on with my husband's storage unit, but it's going on with apartments.
so affordable housing and affordable rental would be the vision for this entity.
Yeah.
Well, yes.
But I know that maybe that's something we bring to the state. Do we have any means of maybe at least educating our population about these clauses and leases and what to look out for when they're negotiating leases with landlords?
It's in our, used to be on our website. I don't know if it's still there, the, tenant bill of rights, whatever. It mentions that.
I mean, and one thing it does, which is detrimental to the community, is it forces people to keep moving around.
Yeah,
And that's when they lose their voter registration status and, you know, their paperwork gets lost for their benefits or whatever, and it just exacerbates a whole list of social ills.
and does the county have a need for additional property? Excuse me.
Do we have,
Other than like building judicial center, all that stuff, and,
East Side Library, East Side Youth Center, library, we're good now.
yeah.
Let's Rob.
But like, for a 10-year projection, does the county need additional property?
I don't think we've ever conducted analysis in that nature, but the answer just right off the cuff of my head, of course. I mean, we're gonna, you know, as we continue to grow, we're gonna have additional needs in the fire station. You know what I mean? Like I can list a litany of things that we need property for.
But that mainly is handled through SPOS and, central services currently, correct?
That's right.
Okay,
And like I said, it's not uncommon for a local government to have a real estate function, right? But that's not something, our real estate function is decentralized. And I thought maybe I heard someone say, well, maybe it should just be in one place. And that's the case. And we can certainly just put all our real estate functions in one department.
LBA, let that do that. I mean, let LBA be.
Well, the LBA is not a staff department. I will say that.
Yeah.
That's an authority separate
Yeah.
from us. Now, we have some level.
We have to have somebody to work with the NBA.
Yeah.
You know, but I kind of like, and I just briefly, we just got this, I kind of like, not sure what we need to do, and I know we have to get the majority of our colleagues to buy into this. I kind of like us, creating an authority. And again, I think part of it, sort of like we do with the, planning and some other places, that some of those people that were on that authority have some of the expertise though, to help us. And then I'm okay with it, we need to hire somebody to work with that authority in order for the land bank for us to do what we want to do. That's sort of my thought process, but again, I don't have to get the majority. Our colleagues still sort of agree with that. And to, Commissioner Lane's point, help us bring in some of these private entity dollars to help us with our affordable housing and rent stuff. So
So to recap, the authority, we want a component of it to be affordable housing. Did I hear real estate as well?
I think both of them, to me, yes, both of those, real estate and affordable housing.
So the land bank authority, you would want to be the point of contact to go find a space for the judicial center.
I think it makes sense.
Leave that in central services.
You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I just don't want us as a committee to be reinventing a wheel that's been
Yeah.
running in Athens-Clarke County since we sat down in these seats.
Yeah.
So like the land bank and what we want them to do as far as affordable housing should be our main focus.
Yeah.
Like going into central services shouldn't be, going into TPW shouldn't be, because these people are already knowledgeable on what they're doing.
Yeah.
I go along with that too. Yeah.
And we have an affordable housing plan too, and the affordable housing plan says create a land bank authority. That was one of the.
Yeah.
Right, so, and then also in the affordable housing plan, it also speaks to what the land bank authority could do.
Right.
One of those things is the strike fund. I keep going back to these things, that's what the
Right.
affordable housing plan says. So I just want to anchor back to that, because we pay a lot
It
of.
could be too far. I think strike one could be a part of the authority's mission too, though, yeah. But until that point, then we need to stick to affordable housing, purchasing land. Again, how do we deal with affordable rent? And that's gonna be a challenge, but again, but I think if we do the affordable piece, the rent piece may take care of itself. So.
If I may, it sounds like there may be a consensus here about using the existing land bank authority that already exists. But just to follow up on the earlier question, consolidated governments can create the authority by resolution. We can also dissolve that by resolution if this body wanted to.
So, just got a question about the bylaws. So, so the land commission will elect the board, but do you know how that board was set up? It doesn't mention, like specific, and I could be wrong, it doesn't mention like specific people of interest, like, a real estate attorney has to be a board member. An attorney has to be a board member. But, I think it's essential that, we have an administrator
Yeah.
and someone, maybe that administrator is that person who has the real estate experience as well. But it just says on page 5, it just gives
Looking at it, yeah.
officers, chairperson, vice chairperson, secretary, and treasurer.
Could those be amended to include, what we see with what Sarah gave us? Cause most of these board authorities have like 7 members. Could we amend the bylaws to include 2 more members? Or how, 2, 3, 4, 5, yeah.
Make it 7.
I think they could amend the bylaws fairly easily.
Depends on what the resolution says.
That's right.
I'm honestly checking it. Because the bylaws can conflict with resolution. And I assume the resolution has the numbers.
Yeah, so under,
I'm sorry,
I'm looking at a provision under Title 48, it says that the Land Bank Authority shall have 4 members. And so that would obviously trump the bylaws, but I will take a further look at that and just verify if there's nothing else instead of all that conflicts with that.
Could they assign very specific, functions, I say functions, or KSAs that they want that they want their board makeup to have a real estate function, a law function, understanding, like, you know what I mean? Like, you have to have someone who sits in this seat. Or
You have to
member
make it do that.
Yeah,
Like by bylaws?
By bylaws.
Like through the bylaws?
yeah.
I'm not seeing anything in the state law that would prevent that. And I think that's, something that the board could do.
We would just need to check that to be careful, because we wouldn't want to run into an argument that we're preempted by making it more restrictive. My guess is as long as there's nothing specific that says we can't, we'll probably find, as Austin said, but we just want to be careful.
We create an administrator and the board that, we elect. Because the current bylaws is not set up that way. You want that administrator to have that central function to say, okay, my job is to look for affordable housing, pieces of property or whatever. And then you have the board to provide guidance.
Yeah, I think that's something we need to look into.
It's a lot.
Are there commissioners on this? I think there, or is the mayor the chair?
The provision in Title 48 that I'm looking at, it says that the local governing body has authority to appoint the 4 members of it.
Okay.
The bylaws that were adopted in 2012 or 2014 here said that the members may be an elected official or employee of the unified government.
But what if I think of just having an administrator? Maybe the administrator may have some staff and a board,
Yeah, 'cause I guess,
like ADDA.
I'm looking at, making bills, and they're they're unified government. And what they got is, they got 5 members, got executive director, 1 property coordinator, and an office manager.
That's making bid.
Yes.
What's their population?
They have more folks than we do.
About maybe 200, maybe. What?
Not a whole lot.
Okay.
So, seems like we're in an impasse right here. Can you provide us guidance, Nikki?
Yes. Well, to be clear, on board makeup
Yes.
and whether or not we can just amend or change, we'll work with the attorney's office. And also, maybe even craft some sort of draft vision, mission statement for y'all on what we want the Land Bank Authority to do. And you guys can say yea or nay to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Y'all cool with that?
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. We got our marching orders for the LBA. Hopefully at our next meeting, we'll be able to finalize it and move it to the marriage commission. All right.
And in the meantime, if we have questions, send them to you and.
And Andrew.
And Andrew.
Austin, yes.
Andrew.
Andrew Austin.
And Courtney. Yeah. Thank you.
I remember your name because my sister's name is
Oh,
Courtney.
that's right.
Courtney and Tiffany.
Does
You'll never forget me.
staff have anything else they would like to provide, any insight or direction?
We'll continue to collect information. We've kind of been doing that for about a week, so there are outstanding like phone messages that we kind of left in places, and hopefully they'll get more information. But as they do, we'll update this document. Also, I think, Andrew, the reason that I don't think you guys had access to this before is because I think it's kind of blocked by him. So once he gets back into town, I'm sure he'll give you more access to see what we're kind of providing. But obviously, we'll do whatever, Nikki needs us to do to support this.
All right, thank you. We're gonna move along to board authorities and commission, and we have our lovely Jean Spradlin on the phone. So we've been working on our BACs for a while, and we kind of put it on the shelf to collect some dust. Unfortunately, so Nikki, can you give us a highlight of where we are?
Yes, sir. As you all know, we've talked about BACs for some time, and I would be remiss if I didn't note that we have a lot of BACs.
Yes, we do.
To the point where, you know, candidly, we have trouble staffing some of them. In addition to that, what you'll hear today, I think, is just a brief overview of all the things that related to BACs. They're not all set up equally. So, you know, as a staff member, we try to go to BACs and work with them. We do go to BACs and work with them. But sometimes we just have to dig into the ordinance, the resolution of the bylaws to understand exactly how they function, because not every BAC is set up like other BACs. And that's okay too. That's okay. We here in Athens, as I come to understand, we appreciate resident engagement, public engagement, which is great. We may be able to utilize more folks in the community to be on very specific BACs and get more out of folks if we have maybe a limited number of BACs. I say that because I think part of the reason why we're struggling to have people on BACs is because they serve on everything. If you'll notice, you'll see the same people serving on BACs, right? Which is fine. But there's a limited number of people who want to serve, and there's a lot of seats in BACs. So I think that's part of the conversation. I think that's been part of the conversation in the past. I know making sure that we have some continuity in the way we approach BACs is part of it as well. But we've done a presentation recently, November of 23. So Sarah will kind of go over a history of kind of where we've been, part of that conversation. And I sent out a listing of all the BACs, and I think they're tiered as well. If you look at it, you'll just see, we just have an immense amount of BACs. And that's boards, authorities, and commissions. Sorry for those who are watching from home. But with that, I'll turn it over to Ms. Jordan.
Okay, well, good afternoon. How's everybody doing? So since the committee has not spoken about this since January, we just thought it'd be a good starting place just to kind of summarize how we got to where we are. So please do the next slide. So we're gonna just summarize the topic and past discussion and kind of share an overview of some key questions for y'all to consider and hopefully to give us some more direction as we kind of move forward. And so as Nikki kind of shared, when we say BAC, you know, government, we love our acronyms. We have acronyms for everything. But generally what we're talking about in ACC Gov, we use it as a catch-all for boards, authorities, commissions, committees. It could be task forces, working groups. We have a ton of names for all of these bodies, groups of people who traditionally, depending on what type of group it is, they may either be advisory in nature, or in the case of like some boards and authorities that are permitted under state law, they may even have decision-making authority of their own. And so there are legal distinctions that Sherry ran over with y'all back, I think in September, related to how each type of board, authority, commission, or committee, like what they're generally allowed to do, based on who has authorized them, whether it's been authorized from the mayor and commission, or whether it was authorized under state law or a contract or anywhere in between. So there are legal distinctions. I wanted to make sure to note that here because it is very important as we kind of move forward in our discussion. And so as you noted, there are We have roughly 63, and that was when Jeff counted back in January. So there could even be more that have been created since that point, because as Nikki said, it is a value of our commission and of our organization to make sure we.
The mayor has created 4 additional authorities, so yeah.
So we can go on and add that to 67. So we should have 67 right now. So Chase, if you don't mind. So just kind of an overview of the history of this topic. So while on the screen it shares that this committee has first started talking about this in September of 2023, I actually want to harken back to the commission as a whole started kind of talking a little bit about this at their retreat in August of 2023. And so there were some talking points that they discussed as a group, that y'all discussed as a group with the full body, of some things that you kind of want to dive in on and make clear or have some clarity around related to BACs. Some of which included that quantity, right? That big quantity piece. But we'll also touch on some of those other high points that y'all mentioned in that retreat as well as we move forward. But so y'all talked in September, Sherry gave a large overview of a lot of important legal and background information on BACs. So that's really critical. And so I've touched on in another slide on some of that, but then in October, we kind of dove into, and you heard from Jean, and Clerk Spratlin is on the phone. She's joining us telephonically, but she kind of shared some information with y'all related to the application period and the interview process for BACs. And y'all kind of tossed around the idea of, did you want to create a resolution that would encompass all of our BAC policies and procedures, just to make sure there's consistency? Because y'all, when Nikki asks, what is the problem that we're trying to solve here? From my vantage point, and I think staff would agree, we have a lack of consistency in how these BACs are governed, what their policies are, what their authorities are based on how they're authorized, and all of that can become really complex, as you can imagine, with 63, now 67 different entities. So creating some consistency is going to be really important. Then in November, y'all started diving into specific BACs so that you could kind of understand more about some of the problems that we're seeing. So y'all touched on the Athens Cultural Affairs Commission, Athens in Motion, and the Commission on People with Disabilities. And you talked about some opportunities to streamline and unify the BACs. Of note, in that conversation, you also talked about some of those BACs that do have the authority to go out and collect revenue and funds, whether it's through grant funding like the Athens in Motion Commission, or as we saw in January with the Keep Athens-Clarke County Beautiful ordinance, where they actually are authorized to get donations. And so in January, we dove into that Keep Athens-Clarke County Beautiful ordinance. And one of the things that was touched on, I think it was you, Commissioner Taylor, mentioned that you might want to consider having M&C approval before allowing the BAC to accept donations. So that's just kind of a general summary of where we've been. And then Shanice, if you don't mind, I did pull out some very important information from Sherry's large overview that I wanted to make sure we kind of brought to our focus. But of course, I'll defer to Sherry here on any questions you might have. But as y'all noted in your land bank authority discussion, under the charter, boards, authorities, and commissions are supposed to be created by ordinance of the commission. And so we see that we now have some that are created by resolution, some that don't have any ordinance or resolution attached, some that are created by even contract or agreement. And so we don't have a clear consistent way by which each BAC has been created. Also, she referenced section 2-105D of the charter, which just kind of outlines your role and your power as it comes to BACs. So y'all can create, change, alter, combine, abolish, consolidate, and redefine, the manner of appointment, membership, powers, and duties. But it's really important to note, and we kind of touched on this a little bit with that land bank authority discussion, is that some boards, and most, if not all of our authorities, are created or are created pursuant to state law. And so the ability for y'all to actually have a lot of influence or change to those that are created by state law is limited. And so those types of boards and authorities are exempted from that section of the charter. And then Sherry also touched on that the mayor, with his power and authority, he does have the authority to make committee appointments, which you correct me if I'm wrong, what I recall from that conversation is you also shared that based on the intent of the language that was included in that charter, it also could be perceived that he also has the authority under that provision to also create committees.
That's,
Sherry, is there anything you want to touch on related to like the legal aspect of this as our
no, that's a really wonderful summation. And just to add a little point of clarification, what Sarah said is absolutely correct. The problem is that the charter doesn't actually say who has the authority to create committees. And they're very explicit in the section of the commission, like they talk about, what is it? They say bureaus, boards, commissions, departments, divisions, authorities, offices, and agencies of the unified government. So they're very exhaustive. They did not put the word committee there. The only related reference to committees is under the mayor, which says he has the authority to make committee appointments. So in trying to give meaning to the words in our charter, which is what we're tasked to do, we think the most appropriate interpretation is that the mayor gets to make committee appointments and gets to create the committees that he appoints them to.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we start with the idea of creating a more consistent process? Cause that seems like, so instead of so essentially all boards and authorities need to be created by an ordinance, correct? And then secondly, they need to have consistency with like bylaws, is that correct?
I mean, they don't have to. I mean, I think if you look at Robert's Rules of Order, for example, which is not binding in this context, but Robert's Rules of Order certainly contemplates that bylaws are created by the entity to govern themselves. What is unique about our situation is that we have a number of VACs where they have been allowed and certainly nothing prevents them from creating their own bylaws. Whereas other VACs have bylaws that specifically say that they must be approved by the mayor and commission to be effective. So that was one of the things we talked about in the past. Does the mayor and commission want to require, for instance, that they approve all bylaws for all VACs? That does mean that like some pretty ticky requests to change bylaws could come before the mayor and commission, but that may be what you want.
To be honest, because I haven't forgot this conversation. To be honest, Sherry, the last time we spoke about this, my main thing is that BACs, though they are created by mayor commission, don't feel the need that they don't need to come before mayor and commission to make decisions that could affect our seats. Because at the end of the day, I'm thinking about my seat. Be honest. And so that's really a main thing for me. And I think that was kind of what you were saying. I know it'll be tedious for us, but I also think that we should at least see it when it's needed. Yeah.
And let me offer one way that you might be able to limit what comes to you. Is if staff has a work plan for all, right, for every VAC, right? So we know what they're doing. Right now, that's just not the case. I mean, it's just for a number of reasons. So, that's one way to make sure that we know exactly what the VACs are doing. You know exactly what the VACs are doing, and you're not surprised by any of it.
Yeah.
So that brings up the second challenge, will be dissolving some of these or combining some of these, BACs. So the tier one, we can't touch anyway, those are run by the state. But the rest, we have some sense of, we can make some changes to. Do you have a question? Commissioner?
I mean, I just think that some of these by nature are gonna dissolve themselves, like we have these NERPA committees, those are gonna go away very soon. And yeah, I do think some of them could be combined. Like maybe deferred compensation and pension could be combined. Maybe somewhere in there, solid waste and.
Yeah, I don't think those two could be.
No, see, that's the thing. Maybe we need some, guidance on which of these could logically be combined because they do deal in the same realm. And a lot of these only meet quarterly or so. So maybe if they were combined and had monthly meetings, a more focused board, they get done what they need to get done with the same one.
I would hate to ask this of staff. Can we get a summary of all 63, 7?
Let me, before we go down that path, though, can you go back to that slide where we had the charter? So y'all correct me if I am wrong on the charter piece. So what it says, per the charter, board authority commission are supposed to be created by ordinance. I would like to know then how many right now are the BACs was created by the ordinance, and then which ones wasn't. If we follow in the charter, the ones that's not created by ordinance should go away.
But,
Except for one that's in Cheatham, I get that piece.
but the mayor has authority.
Right.
So the mayor can override.
No, so this is part of the confusion. The mayor has the authority to create committees.
Right.
Unfortunately, we have not always been very clear when we call something a committee, whether it is in fact committee, or sometimes the word committee or commissioner board isn't even in there. So example is like the Athens Justice and Memory Project. That was created by resolution as part of the Linen Town, so it's a very small piece. And so the question is, what was that intended to be? Because it was done by resolution of the commission, but the mayor was heavily involved in sort of the creation of that body. So right now we have it listed in tier 3 as a committee, but if the intent was that it was really gonna be a board authority commission created by the commission, then it should have been done by ordinance.
Right.
And there aren't my recollection, please correct me if I'm wrong, Jeff, is that there are not a lot of the true BACs that don't have an ordinance. Maybe I'm wrong.
So they're listed in this document in the last column.
I know Athens and Motion doesn't have one.
Yeah, there's a handful.
Yeah.
The other thing too is that, I can't remember if this is in this discussion or not, Sherry, but correct me if I'm wrong, in that it was generally seen that committees versus boards, authorities, and commissions, that committees were designed to be of more of a temporary nature.
That's right.
Yeah. You know, with maybe some set dates, or that's not necessarily always been done, but that was also kind of one of the senses that we've had with committees, if they're not generally supposed to be kind of ongoing forever as that goes.
That's right.
Well, to Mr. Lane's point, then we need to figure out then what committees may be involved and have to move forward. If we know that, is there a timeline on those particular committees?
I mean, I'm not advocating for necessarily dissolving any of them, because I feel like they all have valid functions, but there are, maybe 3 or 4 in some way can be combined into 2. Just so that combining a couple of them here and there. I feel like I am advocating for this kind of citizen participation. I feel like it's essential that we have apolitical citizen advisory committees that are existing outside the realm of the electoral process and are not influenced by politics and, have some expertise in the area in which they're advising. So I think, I feel like Athens in Motion is a vital organization. We have this, pedestrian bike plan that needs to get implemented. And as a commissioner, I certainly don't have time to evaluate all of those projects. These are people with serious interest in and experience in, pedestrian and bike safety. And I value their input, along with staff. And, I actually advocated for the creation of that committee, because we were getting stuff before us as a commission, and it was too much. It was overwhelming. So, I feel like a lot of these committees are really taking the burden off of us as elected officials, and also taking some of the politics out of these decisions and then, acting as advisory does. But when it gets in our lap, yeah, it does become political. And it's up to us to, use our political capital and decide what's the greater good. And whether or not to take their advice. But I mean, I think it's essential that we have that in a democracy, in a functioning democracy. I feel like it's essential that we have these kind of opportunities for citizens with expertise to offer this kind of direct advice outside of the political process.
Yeah, and that goes back to my point of the BACs coming back to the Mayor Commission. Because we do have interest groups who feel like their mission is more important than having to come back to Mayor Commission who created them to begin with. And so then you get into the entitlement piece, whereas we don't feel that we should have to come before Mayor and Commission, but everybody don't ride bikes in schools. We also have cars who could easily want to be a committee who says, I think that we should do away with bike lanes. And so that's what I meant when I said I feel like BAC should come back to Mayor and Commission because we do get into that entitlement piece. And I just don't want that.
But none of them make decisions that are implemented without our approval. That's the thing. They're advisory.
Yeah, but that's why I
Except
want
for
to
when
make
it comes to
sure.
maybe the HPC, but even that has an appeal process.
The
That's
planning-
state law mandated.
The planning commission, I thought that's required.
Yeah, so maybe what would help if when we're thinking about ones that we could change, there are a number that are maybe I shouldn't say mandatory. I mean, certainly there's some places where things have been dissolved. But like generally speaking, you're gonna need your planning commission, your HBC, your work comp, your pension board. Things that have a purpose that is largely enshrined in state law. Board of elections obviously is one we can't touch. But there's a lot of BECs, and I do not mean to minimize what they do, but they are optional. Athens in Motion, Athens Cultural Affairs Commission, the Human Relations Commission, the
All the time.
Community Pre-Council, yeah, all of those are things that, keep Athens kind of beautiful. They serve a great function, I'm not trying to say, but they're not necessary.
So the one that, if I would recall, the ones that are marked D, the temporary ones, correct?
So we can make appointments, yeah.
Mayor Portnoy. Okay, since we're rehashing this, can we as a group go back over this and look at the amount of BACs that we have and the ones that were created, it's like the ARPA advisory after October, they're done.
Yeah.
So those will be coming off.
Maybe to your Commissioner Davenport, do we know the ones that might be dissolved? Do we know that? I mean, do we know that the ARPA is gonna be dissolved? Are there any more like that though? That may be coming off the list? And again, I don't know.
Yeah, there will be some, there are also some that are like default.
I think Sherry told us the property committee, the prosperity committee, and the violence prevention committee. That they all had charged sunsets the last time that we spoke. These are just my notes I'm going to.
No, you're right, I don't remember.
And the stormwater advisory committee, they finished their task. So we voted and moved that in June, I believe.
They were tasked with the stormwater fees, right?
Yeah, for that to come on.
So the ones where you see E are inactive.
Okay. Now,
So, I mean, the vision committee is something that's pretty unique to this community. I feel like it's essential to have that citizen input on distributing that federal money, but maybe that's a task that could be absorbed by one of the committees that's created by ordinance, like, or resolution, like maybe the Human Relations Commission could start taking on that task or something like that.
to be honest with you, I'd love to dissolve that one, but I get. That's,
I mean, I feel like it's an essential function and we need a citizen input board to perform that function. But maybe it's a function that could be performed by an existing committee that has some kind of, more directed, existence.
It's about the bottom page.
But,
And I do think that one of the things that, as speaking to, for example, the Stormwater Advisory Committee, or even, I know we ran into this a little bit with the homelessness group, is sort of a charge and a time frame aren't usually part of that creation. And so there's a little bit of uncertainty as to when those end, and that's where it's challenging for us sometimes to figure that out when it's not necessarily as defined.
If I could piggyback on that, I think Athens in Motion is a really good example of that, because the resolution created, then, and all it says is, shall be established to advise the mayor and commission on the development, implementation, and modification of an Athens in Motion plan for a safe and connected network. And so, there's an argument reading this resolution that once the plan has been created, or maybe even shortly thereafter for implementation, that they've served their purpose. And I think in reality, that's not how the commission has looked at it. I think they felt, as Commissioner Link said, that Athens in Motion is really important and that we want to continue using them. But that leaves staff in the sort of difficult position of, we have a very limited resolution from 2019 that doesn't speak to what should this body be doing moving forward. Take another example I think that staff talked about is Oconee Rivers Greenway Commission. They had a whole lot of work to do in the beginning, when there was, I think, less staff associated with them. And also we were talking about actually acquiring property for the Greenway Commission. I don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that there's very little work left for them to do, at least in comparison to what they first did. So they're just, I think it's, there's room for looking at the purpose of these entities. Has it been fulfilled? Is there more work that needs to be done? And if there is, that's fantastic, but let's give some direction as to what that is, which would sort of be the argument. And again, I'm not involved in policy, but when I'm asked to review these from a legal perspective, I'm at a bit of a loss if I don't have clear guidelines that I can point to.
I understand.
And one other one I think worth pointing out, which was mentioned on one of these slides, was the Commission on People with Disabilities, which was created by ordinance. It's also a gigantic commission of 30 people, by ordinance. There was some talk about potentially that being something that HRC or inclusion deals with, but that's kind of another one that is.
Wait, which one are you talking about? Sorry, it's big.
Commission on People with Disabilities.
Oh, yeah. I was thinking about that one.
Online, we can get a description of each of the BACs, correct?
I will say yes with an asterisk. There may be a few that we've had trouble sort of tracking down, but most all of them, yes.
For the Rails to Trails Committee and the Police Advisory Board Development Task Force, our last meeting, it was told that committee is done. And also a question, so if we decide not to dissolve them, do they just like dormant and not be counted? Or do they still get counted and just be dormant?
A little of both, is what I would say to that, is that sort of the Rails to Trails, we've been sort of told this is done, and we actually run into this with another board, they never really, to my knowledge, sort of voted,
To be done?
like, here's our final meeting minutes. Which there's, I think it's homelessness, we ran into that issue with as well. And so there's no formal action. So again, we're kind of in a bind of, we wanted to list it because sometimes, well, take for example, the Land Bank Authority, some of these others that are out there, they may not have met forever. We're a little reluctant to say this is dissolved because there's not been any formal action to do so. And so sometimes that's where you'll see something like the Rails to Trails, which I don't think is met in many years, but we're reluctant to not put it on this list.
Okay, but this,
And the police advisory one was to develop
Yeah,
the public safety
Yeah.
civilian oversight board.
which has been.
That one's, but again, I don't know that they took a formal action as part of that.
Can the man commission through a resolution dissolve those?
Well, the interesting argument would be, like, for instance, the public or the police, I forget the exact name, but the one that set up Peace Cop, it was created by the mayor. So I would say he has the authority to disband that. same thing with like sort of the inclusionary zoning task force, which is currently on hold pending like a next project, although I think people anticipate there will be a next project.
So explain that, so the mayor will have to, at a meeting, do a resolution, how would,
I mean, I don't know that the mayor has a particularly formal way of creating these committees. Yeah, if you'd like to speak to that.
I was gonna say, I'll give you one example though, where this did happen, was the 100% clean and renewable energy plan. So that, you'll notice, I don't think it's on this list, but it's on the old one, because that one, we actually, I believe, asked and said, is this one dissolved? Told, yes, that one no longer exists, which I think was just an email from the mayor.
Right.
Which I think was sufficient from that standpoint.
because I think for a quick cleanup, get the mayor to say, hey, these are no longer needed, they will reduce the list. Commissioner Lee.
Yeah, so we talk about the Greenway Commission and their vision like being, pretty much, and the rail trail too, we had these visions for trails 20, 30 years ago, and they're about, built out, or, I mean, the Greenway isn't, but we have a process in place within staff to do that. But they also have, especially the Greenway Commission, has an environmental function, which also the tree council does, but the tree council is very, very limited to tree ordinance stuff within planning. I recently got on the tree council and, I really was hoping to be on a committee that had a broader kind of environmental influence. I kind of wonder if maybe these entities and maybe somehow with the Keep Athens County Beautiful Advisory Board, these could be combined into a single entity that deals with environmental advisory to the commission. Whether it is updates to the tree ordinance or, beautification and plantings like KACB does, and the Greenway, as we acquire land for protection of our river and additional trails. Maybe those kind of entities can be combined into something that is more, I mean, the Greenway Commission was very work oriented. They have researchers on there that did actual work. And the tree council has some of that too, but our staff is the one doing, we have our arborists and our foresters, and they're the ones basically just calling upon this committee to rubber stamp or offer input onto, tree related stuff within our ordinances. But I kind of wonder if we could combine those into a broader citizen environmental advisory committee that deals more broadly, with, pollinators in our environment and, just maintaining native habitats and, developing programs for encouraging environmental preservation within our own little.
So our homework for GOC, for our next meeting, let's go through, we'll go online to HC Gov and look at if it's online, if the BACs that are online, look at them and see which ones you would like to have combined, except the tier ones. And I'm gonna contact the mayor and be like, hey, send an email out to dissolve some of these boards and authorities that are not, that their job is already complete. And from staff, I think we have all the information we need. Do you feel that, think we need any more information?
So if we can just go to the last slide, just so you can see the key questions for consideration. So as we kind of talked about this topic, some of the key elements that, we kind of wanted direction on, as we move forward with whatever deliverable, the committee decides on, whether it's updates to the BAC handbook or whether it's a catch-all ordinance that the attorney's office would help us draft. Are you looking for any changes to the application and interview process? Training, should it be required? Do you want people to be allowed to serve on more than one BAC? We heard that a lot. There were some questions and concerns that we had with seeing people on multiple boards. Should employees be allowed to serve? That came up with the Land Bank Authority question. should staff just start to work on preparing some general ordinances for the BACs that may not have been established by ordinance under the NMC, to make sure that we clarify that for those that might have been done by, like, for example, the TADs were done by redevelopment versus an ordinance. Which should receive stipends. So right now, we have some BACs that get stipends, but not all. And that was something that I know, what I've heard the commission say as something that they wanted to talk more about when it comes to this topic, and hear more about. So what is our consistent policy or practice on that? What should be the process by which, members are removed? Y'all are appointing them, but oftentimes, because the staff liaison's working with that BAC, we might have members that are causing issues with getting quorum for a BAC to even conduct business because they're not attending. But there may not be any clear established process by which people can be removed. And if there even is one on some of the bylaws, I can tell you it's not consistent throughout all BACs. So what would that look like? And then there may be other miscellaneous kind of general policies that you might want to consider. So we have talked about possibly requiring ACC Gov email usage. And as of right now, we do require it. Am I right, Jeff?
Sort of. I would say we kind of have been trying to work through and pilot it. It takes some effort.
Reason being is because of Open Meetings Act and Open Records Act. Asking residents to use their personal email addresses, it can be kind of problematic when we get an open records request. Streaming of meetings, similar to the email usage, we've been piloting that as well. But some BACs have expressed concern about having their meetings streamed because they're concerned. Jeff probably knows more about this than I do because he tends to hear more feedback on this as his office helps coordinate the streaming. But what I've heard is that some feel either pressured or feel like members of the public might hear what's being said on those meetings and then, come back to try to engage with that member one-on-one.
Oh.
Is that fair?
In one instance, there's some different elements of that. And certainly, during COVID, of course, when we started that process and then sort of implemented it for the ones that are in, tier 2 and 3, because we can't necessarily dictate for tier 1. It also tremendously increased the number of streaming meetings that go on a given month by about tenfold.
Yeah.
So, there's that element of it as well.
And so, and y'all went straight to what do we do for defunct ones?
So if they're not streamed, would we still be recording and having a video for people to look back on?
So under state law, we're required to have minutes and it's supposed to require to be an open public meeting. So we would continue to post the agenda as required by law. We would continue to advertise that meeting on the calendar on the ACC Gov website. But in terms of recording it, if we're not streaming it and we don't have that requirement across the board, then likely you would get that information through minutes, not through.
What about an audio file on record that could be?
I would say that's dependent on each BAC. So we don't have a consistent policy right now.
Yeah.
I will tell you for myself, as someone who has taken minutes for BACs, I prefer to have an audio recording because it helps me to go back and hear for when I'm doing my
I
minutes.
think that's important.
And so if I am collecting that audio, then of course that is subject to open records and we could use that as cataloged
Well,
here.
there's also software that can directly go from audio to text and.
But it's not a consistent policy.
So we don't necessarily, for our meetings we do, but for the BACs, we don't necessarily have to stream, because it seems like it's.
Well, you don't have to stream yours either, but there's no legal requirement to stream any meeting.
If it's cumbersome, let's stop doing it.
Well, again, we're not necessarily asking for but we want to bring up the point of, right now, some do, the ones that you all appoint, we have kind of a pilot policy for them to continue doing. The ones that are authorities, some of them choose to do so, some explicitly choose not to do so. They do have to still do an agenda, they still have to do minutes, they still technically have to do also some meeting summary, which is also required along those lines, too. So there's kind of a variety of ways that it's done.
If you're gonna be consistent though, it should be across the board. And I'm always thinking of simplicity.
Well, we can't.
And that's the way it is now.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's essential with stuff like the planning commission, where there are these actual like quasi judicial decisions being made, that it's essential that those are streamlined.
Yeah.
Which organizations don't want to be screened? Like, who's saying something that they don't want besides the commission?
Well, maybe you don't want to.
Well,
Understand how there are like, you know, sensitive topics being discussed, you know, especially when it comes to racial relations and public safety and things like that. Like those get people all up in their feelings out there. And maybe I wouldn't be surprised if some folks on these committees are getting threatened because they have, you know, certain opinions about social justice or whatever.
Well, it's a government, it's one person, but as a government, and because we are also elected officials, if we don't feel that burdensome and we're here by choice, they're here because they asked to be a part of a BAC.
Yeah.
Then the way that it is screened for the public, it should still be, unless it's burdensome, which we will be going through and seeing which ones we don't even want anymore, so it may not be as.
I mean, I'm all in favor of transparency across the board, but then again, I see how sometimes these little clips of video or audio are taken out of context and spread out there on the internet and turned out into a whole bunch of lies and attacks.
Well,
Welcome to government, Carol.
Yeah.
we'll try. Any suggestions or?
Well, I just wanted to share two things, just one point of clarification, there was a question about audio recordings. So I just wanted to share that to the extent audio recordings are created for the purpose of maintaining meetings, the retention schedule just says they have to be held for 90 days. So if the expectation is that staff will hold them longer than that, we would need direction. And then secondly, to your question about entities and recording, I would just say that there are some BACs that do have their own independent statutory authorities, the Board of Elections, tax assessors. I think they would have some ability to make decisions about whether they're streamed or not independently of the commission.
Right.
and that has been the case. So for example, the Board of Elections does, but say the Classic Center Authority does not, you know, that kind of thing. And we can't compel them to do that. The Hospital
Yeah, the
Authority,
authority.
you know, Board of Health, those kinds of things as well. One other thing I would like to also put up on here, because this came up kind of when Melissa, you were talking about three various, you know, so the possibility of Greenway Commission and HCCD and CTC. I just would also like to point kind of related to number one, all of those are appointed somewhat differently.
Yeah. I mean, I'm thinking that some of these might end up having a new ordinance created to create an entity that takes the function of all of those together. And with specific ways of appointing them.
Just real briefly, since we have Ms. Jean Spratland on the phone, would you like to provide any input?
No, I'm fine.
Okay, so looks like we'll be taking this up for our next month's meeting, but for our homework for GOC, can we go through, look through all 67, 8, 9, or whatever, of BACs, look at their definition, looking at the ones, looking at how they were created, looking at how they're appointed, and who appointed them, seeing which ones can be combined. And then we'll come back at our next meeting. And the last slide, do we have that slide?
We can set it down.
Let's send that last slide out as well and just go, review those questions and we can be prepared at our October meeting.
Do you need anything else from staff on this particular topic?
Something, so,
We'll update this later.
yeah. But do you have it?
No, I think I can do it. No, okay, I can't do it. Can we also get like just an overview of who could possibly be combined and who has to stand alone? Because we know that the ones, you know, are above us, so they have their standalone, but.
Pull together some of the shared values, because I think Commissioner Link was talking about a value as it related to environmental,
Yeah.
you know, as if you will. So we can pull together some of the shared value ones, departmental ones, because maybe some are in the same department. But we can group them together. We won't make any recommendations on which ones will be dissolved, but we'll pull groups of them together if that helps.
Right. And if you want to say which ones can be,
We didn't create them, so we don't want to make any recommendations on which ones are dissolved.
I'm thinking that, some of these commissions, committees, whatever, you have the same staff members going to
That's right, that's right.
the same, 2 or 3 or 4 different committees and kind of sharing information between them, when, if they kind of all were combined to be as one, it would relieve the burden on staff, and, the right hand and the left hand might know what they're doing. I mean, I've sat on some of these committees where we reference work that was done in another committee that's relative to what we're doing. And maybe if they were combined, it would go a lot smoothly and things would get done more quickly.
So our objective is, we got too many, it's burdensome to staffers. We want to combine some that are maybe, that are the same value, same scope and scale or whatever, and go from there. Sound good? And then now our next meeting, we'll talk about ordinances to make sure everyone is consistent. All right, motion to adjourn.
So move.
All in favor? Y'all are driven by that.
Thank you.
Much. Thanks, Jeff.